Hello. I have hair oil in, so ignore my hair. But I wanted to give a little update on this therapy type that I've been designing. The minute I'm done with my current project, I'm running into that. I think I really would like to read a lot more about different therapy types, how they were designed, what works, what doesn't work, and just a lot of different practices, therapy practices. Currently, I rearranged my little workbook today to think of some of the big themes that I want to see in it. And I also started doing a lot, I've been doing a lot of thinking about this idea that I have for my therapy type for dissociation, that there should be emergency contacts and who are people in your life who are a support system, but who are also informed in your direction and your treatment and everything that are there for you in instances of distress. And yeah, I have just been doing some thinking today about it, and I'm gonna show you what I did. I want to say one thing. I have a practitioner, a psychiatrist in my life who we were speaking once about this therapy type that I'm forgetting the name. I tried to look it up, but it's in my notes. I'll put the name right here for you and I'll link it below. But there is a really interesting and different therapy sort of format for people with schizophrenia that is really centered around the community, and it's centered around the sort of taking away the sort of power dynamic of that can sort of pop up sometimes in care for people with severe mental illness. And it's very one of the really cool things about the therapy type is actually that therapy can happen anywhere, and the person who's in therapy can actually bring different people from their life into therapy. Anyone that they sort of want to sort of be involved in that session, they can talk about their experience with that person. And I'm really inspired by the idea of making therapy or psychological care something a bit more community oriented, because I think that it can be so I would imagine that that would be so destigmatizing. And I think also just the idea of recentering our communities and the way that we orient our communities to be more create a collective care feeling that I think would have been really powerful for me navigating my own mental health journey. And I think one of the biggest difficulties that I had in my mental health journey, particularly as I navigated some more serious symptoms, was that I felt burdensome. I felt like I didn't know how to lean on my community that well, my support system, and that made me feel sometimes at risk, sometimes alone. And that was one of the big things that I would have liked to have had more of when I was in some a bit of a more serious headspace. And I think that I really wanted centered. So I'm going to show you first of all my emergency contact sort of thinking process, and then we're going to go into the other changes that I've made in the workbook. So in my last video, I talked about the idea that I feel like people should have emergency contacts, which are basically support system individuals that are that have signed off on a contract, basically agreeing to being an informed part of a support system as an individual goes through this therapy type that can be, I would imagine, would be a bit draining, distressing, and potentially even dangerous if the conditions aren't well supportive and well thought out, you know. So I thought that basically you'd have to come up with certain people in your life who you'd feel comfortable making an emergency contact, and those would be people that are part of your support system and who have their own sort of sense of your disorder and how to navigate moments of distress. I've been imagining a system a system of multiple people in this team of this therapy team. So obviously you'd have the person in therapy. So you have their therapist, and their therapist is sort of somebody who is trauma informed, knowledgeable on dissociation specific tools. So that would be things like maybe internal family systems, structural dissociation, therapy treatments like that. Very dissociation informed in terms of informed about things like parts, paranormal parts, emotional parts, and navigating the dissociation like that. Maybe who's also sort of informed in somatic sort of tools, so somatic therapy. This is the base of information that I would want a clinician to have to be a therapist for this type of treatment option. And then, for example, if they're dealing with someone with borderline personality disorder, they'd probably have to have those tools as well, or etc. But these are the base tools that I think it's like the toolbox of therapy types that I think people would like to have. I would like people to have as therapists. And that could also include something like EMDR, just a general toolbox of dissociation and trauma specific tools. Then we have the psychiatrist who's going to be informed in the medication, and that's going to be something scopolamine adjacent, maybe. I actually do need, this is not researched yet. I need to find an actual medication that would be suitable. That's one example of something that lowers acetylcholine, though I was thinking, is that the best? We'll see. I'm finishing up my project soon, probably, so we'll see how that goes. But something like this type of medication, and they would be informed in how to use that, how to administer correct dose, etc. Right? So these are the two people that somebody would be seeing. Then this is the next person in this team. You have the emergency contact. So that's somebody, an actual person in that person's life. So that would be like a friend, a parent, a sibling, some kind of caretaker, or a few people that who know this person well and who are going to be informed in this treatment option. So basically they might get a workbook, though I was imagining, I'll show you in my other workbook, but I was imagining also having a QR code. I even considered maybe an online platform of videos and exercises and things as well that might be a useful addition, that would maybe have videos with trainings. And I just need to figure out that exactly. And I actually thought that maybe in completing this training, people could also get some kind of professional certificate, like for example, a CPD, a continuing professional development certificate, that basically says that they did some kind of training that could contribute to them, even if they wanted to put that on their LinkedIn, their resume. It aids them in some way, shape, or form. And I think that would be a good trade-off as well. I think it just makes sense, and that would be obviously to the context of whatever country they're in, but some kind of professional development certificate, or a certificate that would be created through, I don't know, some central sort of certificate that people might get for doing the training to become an emergency contact. Basically, I want them to know, I'd want emergency contacts to, my big thing was I was just thinking, how do you create this system without running the danger of people developing vicarious trauma? I have many different questions that I put in the description of my last video. How do you facilitate healthy attachment to emergency contacts, particularly if you have a disorder that might already, or some kind of background that might create for difficult attachment to people? How do you ensure that people aren't, for example, now they're extremely attached to their emergency contact, they're calling them every day for anything, and it's really draining on the emergency contacts, etc. So these are questions that I have that have to be addressed before actually running this. But also I think it's good to have, so I actually started to consider, I was like, should these just be individuals within a mental health team? But the reason that I thought of this idea in the first place is because sometimes I would, particularly because of how sharp wave ripples work, sometimes, for example, right when you're about to sleep or in early stages of REM sleep, that's when that consolidation window starts. And a lot of times for me, it was really, really late at night that I would start to sort of have a bit of recovered memory or a fragment or something. And you can't have your emergency team just on call at 1 a.m. or, stuff like that, where as somebody who well might be willing to pick up the phone or come over or something. And I feel like that would really reduce the risk of other sort of risk factors, like suicidality and things. And also I think would facilitate a sense of you have people around that really support you, understand you, and that can be a really, really good boost in trauma in general. That's usually a factor that diminishes the potential for trauma in any situation. So that's why I thought it would be a good system. And it's harder to get in that situation where you're like, wow, this is really difficult. This is emotionally difficult. It's bringing up emotional feelings, and I feel like nobody loves me. Nobody's there for me. I'm going to be of harm to myself. That's what I'm trying to avoid. So that's why I thought of this system like this. But again, because these are average people, you do have to make sure that the training is of benefit to them, something they're willing to do, something they fully understand the responsibility, what isn't your responsibility as well, like your mental health is first. Don't put yourself in a dangerous situation. Maybe have an understanding of what vicarious trauma looks like, what it would look like to start developing that. If you start to feel really attached to this, if you start to feel really depressed, if you start to feel like you're feeling what they're feeling, you need to take a break and you need to reach out and you need to stop, or et cetera, and just have people really thoroughly well trained in what is their responsibility and what isn't. Like these are like probably going to take me a while to develop and do research for, but this is just like a seed essentially. And what does a healthy person relationship to that person in treatment look like, so people can know when it's off? So it should be consensual. You shouldn't feel like somebody's guilt tripping you, like, well, you said you were going to do this, now you're not showing, stuff like that. Joyful. And you should never, I feel like people should never start feeling like therapists. They should always still feel like your friend, your sibling, etc. Communicative, informed, respectful, and they should have their own stress management tools. So then I started to think about, how do you diminish that risk for vicarious trauma as well? I thought that this ended up making me think that this should probably be like a real team situation in which people also have regular check-ins with some kind of somebody to just give an overview. I don't think they should all go to the same therapist. Obviously, that would probably be overwhelming, but have you had any kind of negative run-ins? Is the person okay? Do you think that they seem really off? Or have you had any negative experiences? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Do you need any kind of support? And this person would be basically consistently scanning for vicarious trauma. I thought that it might be cool to have a different person on any, like, let's say you have a therapist office and you're running, some kind of mental health like clinic, and you're running this therapy in that clinic. It could be cool to have one person that's really just dedicated to emergency contacts. They'd have multiple teams of, like, they'd be handling a case essentially. This is in the works. I need to think of the logistics, but like a emergency contact lead or something, and they would basically be in charge of running those check-ins with emergency contacts, and sort of be that way people feel also that they have someone to reach out to if they're getting overwhelmed, if they need to, also in situations like maybe if there's a sort of attachment issue, you could have a group conversation with the emergency contact lead, and the two of you would go through that issue, and they'd be more informed on the interpersonal sort of relationship of the emergency contacts. Like, how do you handle those attachment issues? How do you handle vicarious trauma, etc.? And they would be an expert in that. So then they'd have like, okay, I'm running, you sort of dole it out, like, okay, this emergency contact lead is running Billy, Rachel, Steve, and Sally's emergency contact teams, and they're in charge of doing those check-ins and things. And also I think it takes away maybe that feeling that somebody's sort of talking bad about you to your therapist. That would be the struggle with actually getting somebody's therapist to do that work, where everybody's going to the same therapist. That'd be overwhelming, draining, and it's just not necessary at all. So I think it would be cool to have another person who's a emergency contact expert. And the cool thing about this system is that maybe it would be a good option for other people with other types of disorders and not just this. And then that would be kind of a cool thing too, where you have someone who's just sort of an expert in running like a good community care system. I know there's already community care sort of therapy types for a lot of different, for like schizophrenia is a big one that I've seen, that there's an actual already therapy types even like in the NHS that I need to research. But I think for this one, it was just really specific that I wanted this to be for dissociation, because of how maybe potentially dangerous this could be if not well thought out. And yeah, so I just thought it would be cool to have a emergency contact lead who's really checking in, maybe doing a regular phone call once a week. It doesn't have to be long, but like, how are you feeling? How's it going? Is everything okay? Do you want to talk about anything? Do you want to go over anything in your training? Stuff like that. And that would be kind of cool, I think. And just like give somebody a job. I don't know, maybe people are really someone who's really probably like, they'd have to have these kinds of skills: attachment, vicarious trauma, like just relationship, anything, relationship issues, boundaries. These are the things they'd be sort of really expert in, or really centered around. And sort of interpersonal relationships would be the big thing. And that'd be really cool. I think that'd be a pretty cool option for people. And yeah, they would just be able to pass along support, like support options. And maybe even this would be kind of cool, but maybe there could also be some kind of support group, like a support group for emergency contacts, and they could go in regularly. That could Those are two different options, or they could be both, but a support group for emergency contacts, and that could also be led probably be led by these experts as well. I think it might actually be useful, even it could be beneficial to people who have been already navigating people with this kind of these kinds of traumas, because this is why. The thing is that I imagine that these would be people in the person's life. I think it would actually probably add some kind of benefit for them to really understand their loved one's illness, to finally to have a safe space to talk about how that illness has been impacting them, or what the difficulties are of navigating a loved one with that relationship. And it's good because the person gets to heal, but then you also get an emergency contact that's now supported, now has a support group that they can actually connect with about this experience, about having a loved one who has, I don't know, who went through sexual abuse, and that was already probably causing maybe a bit of distress or confusion, and now they're informed, and now they have tools, and now they have somebody who is really guiding them as well in their experience of navigating a loved one with a mental illness like that. And I hope that that can be useful too, because I think the benefit, I just really want it to be beneficial and not another task, because then you create resentment and people aren't likely to agree. But if you're getting already, you're getting with it, you're getting professional certification that you can put, that can be of use to you. You're getting a support group, you're getting somebody who's an expert in guiding somebody who has family members with illness, so you get tools as well. And I think that hopefully that can be useful to people. And then, yeah, so then there's this kind of system or this kind of team that would involve the individual receiving care, the therapist who is dissociation informed, psychiatrist who's informed on whatever that medication is going to be, and then you get the emergency contacts, and then the sort of emergency contact lead. So that's the system that I want to make. And yeah, I'm working on that. And then you have my workbook that I've just been sort of rearranging. That there's not much to say here, but I really was thinking about what are the central. See, this QR code goes to absolutely nothing. It's just from the internet, but I just imagined maybe a bit of an online platform with additional videos, or maybe something like guided breathing exercises, science of trauma videos that might be interesting for people. Maybe a sort of and I even imagined if I made an actual platform, there could be a space where people can sort of tag that they've had some kind of memory, some kind of fragment, some kind of experience, and then that can go into maybe a little portal, so they're there for therapy, like, oh, I this was in the middle of the night, but I wrote it down here, and then that way you have that little list of maybe some kind of emotion, some kind of feeling in therapy. So kind of like an online journal that can be maybe accessed by both people, can be accessed by a therapist and the individual as well. And then the different things that I want to center, the stress management is one of the biggest tools. The stress management, how do you manage the stress of trauma and the stress of this therapy? Because I think that if you can give people tools to manage their distress, I think they'll dissociate less, and they'll be more aware of themselves, and also be less at risk, because it's about like awareness of the distress. It's okay that the distress is there, it's part of your healing process, etc. Those are things that I want to go into in this chapter, this section. And then making sense of experiences, that's a work in progress title, but just this would have like the journaling pages, how to integrate and things like that. Obviously that's not fleshed out yet, but that's the theme of this section as well. So yes, that's what I've done so far. I actually think I'm going to keep this video pretty short and just end it there, but that's my little seed for emergency contacts and what it looks like to make a good team for people who are navigating this experience that is useful across the board, and etc. And I just really want to go into research for this. I've been extremely busy and just wanting to do this kind of stuff, but unfortunately not there yet, but getting there. So yeah, that's been my little therapy development update.